Allow me to turn your attention to the book of Genesis chapter 15, and then we read of God and Abraham entering together a covenantal relationship, and not just any covenantal relationship, an eternal covenant between God and Abraham, and more than that, between God, Abraham, and his future descendants, the scions of this father of monotheism, of the one who began the road of Judaism. Together with his descendants, they're going to be the chosen people of God, and not only the chosen people of God, but they will reproduce. Abraham himself will become a father of a multitude of people, a multitude of nations, and they'll be given a beautiful treasure, and that, of course, is the land of Israel. And the land of Israel will be theirs as a gift, as a treasure, part and parcel. This covenantal relationship, theirs to the exclusion of everybody else. There we have it. On the pages of Scripture itself, a covenantal relationship between God and his beloved Abraham. This is labeled in the Hebrew language a kritat brit, the forming of a covenant, which, interestingly enough, we invoke the Hebrew word karita, which is a conjugation of an act of cutting off, of an incision. Karet means to be cut off. Why, when one would enter a covenantal relationship, would we allude to such a relationship? Would its nature, very nature, be defined as an act of cutting off? And the answer is quite simple. Because anytime you want to enter a true and whole covenantal relationship with another partner, with another being, you have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be willing to give up a part of what you hold dear, what you hold close to you. So God says to Abraham, you know what? I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up my treasure land, the land of Israel, and I'm going to give up a piece of myself. By entering this covenantal relationship with you, I'm going to allow you to get closer to me than anybody else. And at the same time, though, but Abraham, I ask you to cut off and make sacrifices and cut off a piece of yourself. And that's one of the biggest decisions that anybody has to make in his life. The very word decision, in fact, comes from the Latin word, the Latin root side, homicide, suicide, which connotes a sense of cutting off. To make a decision means I'm cutting off a piece of myself. You love ice cream? You want vanilla? You love chocolate? Well, you're going to have to make a decision when you go into the ice cream store. Which one do you want? If you choose the vanilla, that means by disallowing yourself to taste the chocolate, you're thus simultaneously cutting off a piece of yourself. Every time you make a decision. A crisis, in fact, Robert Levine writes in his book, A Geography of Time, that the word crisis is really taken from the Greek word decision. And the idea of a crisis is a decisive point. Crisis sounds a lot like the word karet. Krisos, cutting off. Sometimes we enter certain situations, we have to cut off a piece of ourselves. How about marriage? Do you know in the Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Sanhedrin in 22b, the Talmud actually uses this identical terminology that when you get married, you're entering into a covenantal relationship with your spouse, and that again is defined as an act of kritat brit, because to enter a fully successful marriage, you want to have all that optimism to have a wonderful Jewish home, a great welcoming and warm ambiance, then you have to be willing to make sacrifices, to make decisions, but to make acts of cutting off a piece of yourself. Making important sacrifices in life for your partner, for your spouse. God is using this covenantal relationship with his dear and beloved servant Abraham as a model for us to echo throughout our lifetimes, not only in our relationship with God, but in our relationship with our spouses. And those we hold so dear, those we love so much, we have to be willing to make sacrifices, to cut off and allow another person in. If God is willing to do that and merge and fuse with mortal man and create that eternal and everlasting covenant, then when we enter the covenant of marriage, we should look to that model and try and emulate God's ways. And what Abraham did, cut off a piece of yourself, let somebody else in, merge, fuse with another partner. Always remember to make those crucial sacrifices, and that'll bring a successful home and a successful relationship, an everlasting one, with our dear and beloved God.